Over the course of this project, we will be developing a GitHub workflow for a Node.js application. To simplify understanding and making the process more streamlined, we will utilize this project status meeting slides. These slides will present an overview of the task we will be performing and the reason behind the changes. Additionally, comments will be provided wherever necessary to further clarify the context. So to begin with, we will be working on this 9 tasks. We will first work on the first 4 tasks by understanding the Node.js application and the DevOps requirement. Then we'll start building the workflow by creating jobs for unit testing, code coverage, and containerization. Thank you. Let's take a brief look into Node.js. In a later model, we will utilize the Node.js application to develop a customized GitHub action workflow. So Node.js is an open source runtime environment that enables developers to execute code outside of web browsers. So with Node.js, the developers can create both front-end and back-end applications using JavaScript. So Node.js is built on top of Chrome V8 JavaScript engine. This makes it possible to build back-end applications using the same JavaScript programming language you may be familiar with. Node.js can be installed on all major platforms, including Windows, Mac OS, and various Linux distributions. So within Node.js, when we install it, npm also gets installed. So npm stands for Node Package Manager. It is a package manager for JavaScript and Node.js applications. It is used to discover, share, distribute, and manage the various packages, libraries, and dependencies that JavaScript developers use when building web and server-side applications. So let's explore a sample Node.js project to learn how to run the test and execute Node.js applications. Mind you, this is a very basic minimal Node.js application that displays a simple hello world. So we have a package.json file in a Node.js project, which contains the metadata, including the essential information about the project, like its name, version, dependencies, and the scripts. It is used for dependency management, enabling you to specify which external packages your project relies on developing and deploying your application. To install the dependencies defined within the package.json, we run the npm install command. Once the install is successful, a node_modules directory gets created, which contains all the external JavaScript modules and packages that your project depends on. Finally, we have the index.js file where the actual business logic exists, and a test.js file is used to define the test cases. So we have a npm test command, which is commonly used to execute all the test cases for a JavaScript project. This command runs all the tests defined within the test.js file. Finally, in a Node.js project, we generally use the npm start command to start your application. And once the application is started, we can access it on the browser by making a call on the port number. Thank you. In this session, we are going to understand the Node.js application, running it in the local machine before we start building it in the GitHub Actions workflow. The source code of the application is hosted on GitLab. So let me copy this URL. It also contains some details about how to run this application if you're running this for the first time. So it has all the commands also defined over here. So let me open Visual Studio Code on my local machine, and let me quickly clone it. Okay, I need to go back a directory, and let me clone this. Right, so this is the directory. Let me zoom this a bit or zoom out. Okay, so it has various different files over here. So since this is a Node.js based application, we have the package.json file, which contains all the details with respect to the application name, version, author details, the scripts for starting the application, testing the application, as well as coverage. And for coverage, we have also mentioned that have coverage of 90 lines. And we have also made use of a few dependencies like the Express dependency for creating REST APIs. For testing purpose, we are making use of Mocha JUnit reporter. We are using Mongoose for connecting to MongoDB. And finally, we are using NYC Istanbul for coverage reports, right? And apart from this, we have the application itself, app.js, which contains the backend business logic connecting to the MongoDB using the Mongoose connector. So here you can see that it expects three variables or parameters, which is the MongoDB URI, username, and password. So we will be passing this using the variables and secrets within the GitHub Actions, and it also has the endpoints. Okay, so this is the backend code, and the test cases for this code are part of app.test.js. So we shouldn't be knowing about this, but I'm just giving you an overview about what are the files we have and what do they contain, right? So here we have all the test cases. So we are using chai and chai http for writing the test cases. And this application also has a front end. So for front end, I have a simple index.html page. So all the HTML code goes into here. And then so I also have a JavaScript file, pulls data and displays the data in the HTML page. So this controller has the JavaScript logic over here. And apart from that, I think we will be building Docker images. So this is the Docker file. So we'll be talking about Docker file in a later session. And similarly, we'll be deploying this to Kubernetes. So we also have a folder which contains the Kubernetes manifest files. So these are the major files which we have over here. So let us quickly start by installing all the dependencies. So let's go to the folder. I can do a simple npm install. So it is going to install all the dependencies which are part of package.json, and it's going to create a new folder called as node modules. Okay. So once you run the dependencies, the next step is you can do the testing part. So for testing, since we have already defined a script, so the only command which we need to give is npm test. But this is going to fail, right? So it's going to fail. It's going to give you an error message. And the message is that, we are not passing the MongoDB variables, right? So since we are not passing them, it could not connect to the MongoDB, right? So here in app.js, you need to pass these values, okay? So when you are working with workflows, we will be passing them as part of variables and secrets. But for now, just for the demo purpose, I will be simply hard coding, this variables. Okay, and let me save this. So after you hard code them, if I run the same npm test command again, so it's going to successfully connect to the database, start the server, and run all the test cases. So it won't display anything over here. You can use a simple echo $, and it should give you 0 as the exit code, which means that all the test cases were successfully passed. And this command also, gives you test results.xml file. So this contains all the test case results, right? So we will be, uploading this and using this in the workflow. Okay. So this is the testing part. And then after testing, you can also do npm coverage. So let me say npm run coverage. So it gives you the coverage report. So again, it connects to the database. It starts the server, it runs all the test cases, and it's going to, say that all the test cases are passing, and the coverage is currently 88.88%. But in the package.json file, we mentioned the threshold as 90%. This coverage is failing for the time being. You can see this is an error message, right? So you can also check the echo $? Output. It's going to give you 1 as the exit code. It means that the previous command failed. Okay. So currently the coverage is failing, and it is intended because we are going to cover few scenarios in GitHub Actions based on this output. Okay. And once both of this are done, you can start the server basically, right? So I can use a simple npm start. And before that, the coverage also generates reports. It creates a folder called as coverage. Within the coverage folder, it creates two different types of reports. One is the cobertura coverage.xml, the other one is the JSON summary, and the third one is the lco reports. Okay, so these are the different reports which are generated by the coverage test. Okay, finally, we can do npm start. So what it is going to do is, it is going to start the server on the local machine and listen on port 3000. So I can go to a browser. I can do localhost 3000, and I should say the UI. So this is the front end which is designed or which is developed in the application. So it's a simple solar system based application where it gives you the details about each and every planet. Okay, and it also gives you the host name, like where the application is running. So currently the application is running on my local machine. The name of my local machine is Silent Shadow, so that's the reason you see the pod name as Silent Shadow. But once you deploy this to Kubernetes, it's going to give you the name of the pod which is hosting this application or which is running the application. You can also search different planets by just giving the number of the planets. So if I give 3, it's going to give you the details of Earth. And if you give 6, it's just going to give you the details of Saturn. So these details, these images are stored in an external cloud-based MongoDB database. So it's, making a call to the database, fetching the data and displaying it in the UI. Okay, so this is the application which we will be creating a workflow in the GitHub Actions. So that's all for now. Thank you. Let's understand the requirement of the DevOps pipeline. The team wants to host all the code on the GitHub repository. So once the code is committed to the repository, we want to have a pipeline which starts by doing a round of unit testing using the npm install to install the dependencies, npm test for running the test cases, and also to download the reports. And if there are any errors during the unit test cases, we would like to stop the pipeline. If there are no errors, we would like to continue by executing the code coverage step. So within the code coverage step, we also want to run both unit testing and code coverage in parallel. So we have to also reinstall the npm packages using npm install command and run the code coverage using the npm run coverage commands. And even in the code coverage, we would like to download the generated reports. And there is an exception for code coverage stage. So if there are any errors for the code coverage, we would like to ignore them for the time being and continue processing the pipeline. So as part of the next step, we would like to have a job which is going to do the containerization for us. So it's going to use Docker for building Docker image, running the Docker image, and also pushing it to a container registry. And if we have any errors in the Docker stage, we want to stop the pipeline here itself. And then if there are no errors, we want to go ahead and deploy the application to the dev instance of a Kubernetes cluster. So we'll be using the manifest files. So we'll directly apply them using kubectl apply. It also has an ingress, so we'll get the ingress. So in the next stage, we'll do a round of integration testing by hitting the ingress endpoint, which we receive it from the previous stage. And at this point, if you have any errors, we'll just stop the pipeline and not proceed further. If there are no errors, before we deploy it to the production instance, we'll be having, or we want to have, a manual approval stage where a developer or a reviewer has to review all the artifacts, and he or she can either approve it or decline it. So if it is declined, the pipeline will stop here itself. Or if it is approved, it goes to the next step, which is deploying it to the production Kubernetes instance. So where we'll be running the same set of commands. And after the deployment is successful, We'll also test it using bunch of integration test, which basically calls the ingress endpoint and check some status, right? So this is the DevOps pipeline which we will be creating for the Node.js application using GitHub Action workflows. That's all for now. Thank you. So let's go ahead and import the Git repository which has the source code. The source code, as seen in the last session, is hosted on GitLab. So this is currently there on my personal namespace, and it contains the source code of the Node.js application, the test cases, the Docker file, and also a few Kubernetes manifest files. So we'll try to import this again. So I'll just copy the endpoint. I'll click on plus. I'll click on new project or repository. So here I would like to import the project, and it gives you various options like GitLab export, GitHub, Bitbucket, Gitia, and you can also download or import using a URL as well. So we'll do that using the URL option. So here you have to provide the URL, and you have to also add .git at the end of the line. And you can just go with the default settings. I'll just go with Solar System, but I would like to add this or create this in the demos group. So you can have the same project slug because these are part of different groups. So I'm importing this from the Siddharth namespace to the demos group. So you can use the same project slug. You don't need to change that. And I'll make this public. Okay, so the rest of the steps, I'll just leave it in the default settings and create the project. So it's going to import. So it's going to take a couple of minutes. So let's just wait for that. And as you can see here, the project was successfully imported. It contains the same files which we saw in the last session. So from the next session onwards, we'll start creating or setting up the CI/CD pipeline for this specific Node.js based application. We'll go through a lot of jobs like unit testing, code coverage, deploying them to Kubernetes, and much more. That's all for now. Thank you. Let's go ahead and configure GitLab CI for the Solar System project and also add unit testing job. So if you see in this project, we don't have any CI/CD setup over here. So let's go set up a new CI/CD. So let's configure one. And let me paste in code to save some time, and I'll explain like what's happening over here. So I have defined 3 global level keywords like workflow, stages, and unit testing job. So in workflow, I just named the workflow as Solar System Node.js pipeline, and I've defined a couple of rules. So the first rule, it talks about when to trigger this pipeline. So this pipeline will always be triggered if the commit branch is either main or if the commit branch starts with the word feature. Okay, so here I'm using, a regex pattern to identify the name or the starting word of the branch. So based on that, it's going to trigger the pipeline always, for these 2 branches. Apart from that, I have another rule which has a couple of conditions. So the first rule has an OR condition, and the second rule has an AND condition. So in the second rule, the pipeline will be triggered only if it is of type merge request event, and if the merge request source branch name starts with the feature branch. So if you're trying to create a merge request for a different branch other than which starts with a feature word, it's not going to trigger the pipeline, right? So these are the 2 conditions which I've added here. And talking about stages, I just added one test stage, and I defined a unit testing job. So the name of the job is unit testing. This job is associated with the test stage, and I'm using job container image of type Node.js because we are working with a Node.js based application. So it would be better to use the Node.js Docker image compared to the Ruby image, the default Ruby image. And then I'm using before script to install the dependencies using the npm install command. And in the script part, I'm just going to run the npm test command to, execute the test cases. And if you see here, I'm not installing Node.js in the before scripts because, we are directly making use of the Node.js job image, right? So let's try to commit this. I would like to commit this to a new branch. I don't want to work on the main branch directly. So ideally speaking, we create a future branch because we are setting up CI/CD, right? So let's create a branch which starts with feature slash, I'll just say, setting up GitLab CI/CD. Okay, it's a very unusual name, but let's just go with this name as the branch name. Okay, and I don't want to start any merge request for the time being, so I would like to test few things and then start a merge request. So let's commit this changes to the feature branch. Right, if you see, currently we are in the feature branch. So let's go to the pipelines. A new pipeline should be triggered because we are committing the changes to a branch which is starting with the word feature. So the first rule comes into the picture. So since the rule is matching, it's going to execute or trigger the pipeline. And in the pipeline, so if you see, the job failed. So let's see why the job failed. So a lot of things are logged over here. So let's come from the top. So first thing first, it's making use of a Linux small machine as the runner, and it's making use of the node image which I provided in the job, and it's going to clone or get the source code repository, and it's going to run the step script. So in the step script, it's first installing the dependencies using npm install, and as you can see here, it added around 364 packages and the install phase was successful. But where did it fail? It failed in the npm test command. And as you can see the error message, so it's of type mongoose error, and it's saying that it's not able to find the URI parameter, right? So since it's not able to find the URI parameter, it cannot create a connection to the MongoDB, and hence it's giving you an exit code. So that is the reason the pipeline failed. So if you remember, our application, if I go to the main source code of app.js, it connects to the MongoDB with the help of credentials like username, password, and the MongoDB URI. These are the things which are missing in our pipeline. Since these are missing, it's not able to connect to the database. So how do we provide this status? So these details can be provided as part of variables. So let me just quickly add variables to our job. So in this job, as discussed earlier, the variables can be added at the job level or at a global level. So we'll be adding it at a global level because after unit testing, we'll also do code coverage and deploying to Kubernetes cluster, which might require the same credentials. So let's add it at the global level. So I just added variables, and I added 3 variables: Mongo URI, Mongo underscore username, and Mongo underscore password. So for the URI and username, you can directly hardcode them in the Git repository if required. But in some cases, even these are considered sensitive. So you might, consider adding them to the CI/CD variables to mask them. But for the time being, I'm just going to, use them directly in the, pipeline file. And for the password, yes, you can still hardcode the password like super password, but I don't want to do that. So I would like to get the password from the CI/CD variables. I'm going to mask it for security purposes. So how am I going to create that? I'll be creating CI/CD variable with the name as m underscore db underscore password. So this is going to be the variable key, which I will be creating in a minute. And in order to reference that variable, I'm using the dollar symbol, right? So how do we define the variable at the CI/CD level? So you can go to settings, CI/CD. I'll open this in a new tab. So let me just copy the same key. I'll go to variables, expand them. As of now, we don't have any CI/CD variables. So let's add a variable. So I'm going to go with type as variable, environment as all, and I just want to mask the variable. So for the key, I'm going to use m_db_password, and for the value, I'm just going to use super password. Okay, and let me add the variable. So now the variables added here, it's even masked over here. So let's go back to our pipeline editor, and we can just commit these changes to the feature branch. So we can just say added MongoDB variables, and we'll commit the changes. So we are committing the changes to the feature branch. Okay, so we are not making any changes to the main branch. So if you go to main branch, you won't see any pipeline editor because we don't have any .gitlab.ci file in the main branch. So let's go back to the feature branch. A new pipeline should be triggered. So let's go back and check if there is any new pipeline. So a new pipeline is created. So let's go here. So if you see now, the test or the job has been successfully passed. So let's go ahead and see if there are any logs, right? So if you see, the commit ID is also displayed here. Added MongoDB variables is a commit ID, and it all again made use of the node Docker image. It installed the dependencies using the npm install, and also the npm test command was successfully completed. So initially, it's just going to log a message saying that server successfully running on port 3000. So it's going to start the server, and then it's going to, run the test cases using this mocha command. And here it simply says that, there were no errors found during the testing of the test cases. But ideally speaking, it would be better if you could, see what test cases were executed and, which were successful or which failed in case of failures, right? So currently it's not being displayed in the logs. So if you remember from the previous sessions, so after the test completes, it's going to create test artifact or a test file, which could be used for checking out the details. So in the next session, we'll try to make use of the artifacts keyword and, store or upload the test report for further analysis. That's all for now. Thank you. Let's go ahead and upload the unit test reports and view them using the GitLab user interface. So we'll be making use of the artifacts keyword in order to upload the reports. So I'll just go and search for artifacts, and let me just add few details about the artifact. So I would like to create this artifact and upload always, so that this report gets generated and uploaded even if the job fails. And I don't want the report to be available for more days, so I'll just go with custom 3 days for the demo purpose. And you also need to provide the name. So let me just name this as mocha test result. Okay, and you also need to give the path. So let me give the path. So if you remember, the test command is going to create a file named as test-results.xml. So this is the name which you have to provide it over there. So let me just, okay, I just need the test-results.xml. And apart from this, there's another option called as reports. So what is this reports? So this is something which we didn't explore in the earlier session. So let's talk about this. So if you go back to the CI/CD YAML syntax, and if you go to artifacts, within artifacts, we have the reports option. So again, the reports option is used for collecting artifacts which are generated during the templates within the job, or it can also be used for collecting artifacts for jobs where you generate the reports. So let's see what are the different types of reports available. So I can go to this. So again, it talks about what are the different GitLab CI/CD artifact report types. The advantage of this reports is that, these reports can be used to display some additional information within the merge request or security dashboards, or even within the pipeline view as well. And if you see here on the right side, you can upload the reports of different types. So based on the test which you're doing, like if you're doing some API fusing test, some browser performance testing, coverage reports, code quality, container scanning, right? So we have various tests which are supported by this artifact reports keyword. And out of these tests, we are interested in the JUnit test, right? So within the Node.js application, we are running the mocha test command, which can generate a JUnit report test, which is of format XML. Okay. So if you want to store this report, you need to use reports, JUnit, and the XML file. Okay. So this is how you define it. And this result can be displayed in one or more reports, like, it can be seen in the merge request. So in the merge request, it will be shown if I come down. So it will be shown, something like this. It's going to show you the failed test and, some other information. Apart from this, if you see, you can also see the full report within the pipeline view as well. So if you go within the pipeline view, it's also going to show you like how many tests were, executed and how many failed. Okay, so it's also going to give you some additional information. So let's try to, check this out. Okay, so let me add JUnit. So JUnit, and I'll give the same file name. Okay. So this is the changes which I've done in this session. So I'll just say updated job with artifact reports. I'll just push this to the same feature branch. Let me commit the changes. Let's go back to the pipeline. So a new pipeline is triggered, but let me go to the previous pipeline. In the previous pipeline, you can see that test is 0. Though the test casing or the test cases were successfully executed, you don't see the tests over here because we were not uploading the test report. But in this pipeline, since we are also uploading the test artifact, so even this tab should be populated. So let's go back to the pipelines. Let's go to the job. Okay, it's still running the job. So let's see what's happening over here. So as you can see here, it successfully completed the unit testing job, and it's also uploading the artifact. So it found one matching artifact with this name, and that has been uploaded. Okay, so once uploaded, if you see on the right side, you can also download the artifacts or browse the artifact. So let me click on browse. Right, so it's showing me the test results.xml artifact. You can also click on it, and it's going to redirect you to a different page where I guess it's simply going to show you the output of the XML file. Okay, so this is the plain XML file, but if you want to see this in a better way, you can go back to the pipeline. So let me go back to this pipeline, and in this pipeline, you can see there is a new tab, test tab, which has some data. So here, it's going to show you like how many test cases were executed, how many failed, how many have errors, the success rate, and I think the average latency, right? So it has one job where the test cases were uploaded. So if you open this, it's going to show you the same XML data, but in a visual way using table. It's going to show you, the suit which was used, the name of the test case, the status, and, just check it for all the test cases and the latencies as well. You can also click on view details. It won't show you much, but for additional details, you can check this out. So this is possible because we are making use of artifacts, and also since we are using reports, when you try to create a merge request, if any test cases fail, that will also be visible within the merge request, so that the reviewer check it out and they can provide some comments or either approve or reject the merge request. So that's about the artifacts and how it can be used for the unit testing job. That's all for now. Thank you. So let's go ahead and configure code coverage job and also work with the reports. So in the last demo, we worked on the unit testing job. We saw how to configure, run the test job, and also check out the reports. So let me quickly create another job to work on the code coverage stuff. So let me just copy the same job over here and make some changes. So instead of unit testing, if you see, you can't use a job with the same name, two jobs with the same name. So let's go ahead and change the name to code coverage. And it will be running in the test stage. It will be running in parallel. So both the unit testing and the code coverage jobs will be running in parallel. So I would like to use the node image. We need to install the dependencies before you run the script because this will be running in a different machine. So we'll be using the same before script with the npm install command. And for running the code coverage, the command is npm run coverage. Okay, so this is going to run the code coverage, and we'll also add the artifacts. Okay, so let's go and add the artifacts keyword. And in the artifacts keyword, let me just use expiry date as 3, when as always, and let me give it a name. So let me name this as code coverage result. So we'll just say code coverage result, and I would work with reports. So what kind of reports should I be uploading? So if you're not sure what to upload, so you can always go back to the CI/CD YAML syntax reference. You can go to artifact reports. So within the artifact reports, you can go and check out the different report types. So let's go check out if we have any reports for code coverage. And on the right side, you can see we have tab for code coverage. So let's go to code coverage. And in code coverage, you can collect code coverage reports which are coming in the Cobratura format. So these are basically an XML file, and this is how you can, add the reports, right? So let me just copy this. So it has reports. Within reports, we are trying to collect the coverage reports. We need to mention the format and the path where you have this Cobratura coverage XML file. So let me just copy this entire stuff, go back to the pipeline and paste it. And I think this should be aligned here. So here, the path may vary based on your application. So if you remember, as per one of our earlier videos, the reports are stored within the coverage folder. So within the coverage directory, we have this, Cobratura coverage.xml file, right? So this is the path which you have to provide. And I'm just going with the default path, which is the same thing. Okay, so these are the changes which I have done. And apart from this, since we are working with coverage, so code coverage basically, gives you a percentage which defines like how many lines have been tested within your application. So you can also get that percentage and display that in different places within GitLab CI/CD. So in order to fetch that percentage, you have something called as a coverage. So there is this coverage keyword which can be used to extract the percentage from the job output logs. And once the percentage is extracted, you can use that, within the UI. So it will be displayed in the UI in different places. So what would be the regular expression in our case? In our case, if you want to know, the regular expressions, I think I can go to this tab, right? So I can find examples of different regex patterns, right? So if you see here, these are the different regex patterns for different programming languages and tools. So we are making use of NYC npm test, if you remember, right? So if I go back to my local system and if I go to package.json, if you remember, for the coverage, I'm making use of NYC tool, right? So for this tool, I can make use of this regex. So when the code coverage job runs, it's going to log the percentage using this specific line. So I'm just going to use this regex, okay? So let me just copy this regex, and based on which tool you're using, so you can just check this example regex patterns and use one of them, okay? So let's go back, and we need to also add the coverage option here. So there is this, okay, I think this should come outside. So coverage, and I just need to, provide the regex pattern, okay? So that's it. So if you visualize this, both these jobs will be running in parallel. So before I commit the changes, I would like to add one more job, just a sample job to show you example. So I'll just say sample job. I just want to run this within the same stage, but I want this job to run after the code coverage job. So I'll just say needs, and I'll be providing, okay, this should be an array. So I'll be just providing code coverage job as the, requirement to run this job. So I'll just use the image. I don't need any before script. I'm just going to say echo testing sample job. Okay. So I just added a sample job. So if you visualize this, so the sample job will run only after the code coverage job. Okay. So let's see what happens in this case. Okay. So let me quickly, commit this. Added code coverage job. I'm just, committing the changes to the feature branch. Okay. So the pipeline is created. So let's go and check out the pipeline. So it has 3 jobs, and both the unit testing and the code coverage jobs will be running in parallel, and the sample job will be waiting for the code coverage job to complete. Okay, you can also visualize this using the dependencies tab as well. Okay, so as you can see here, our pipeline has failed. So the unit testing job was successfully passed, but the code coverage job failed. Since the code coverage job failed, the sample job will be skipped because the sample job depends on the code coverage job, and since it is failing, the sample job will not be triggered. Okay, so let us see what is failing in the code coverage job. So if I go back to the code coverage job, so you should see a lot of logs. So it did run the npm install command to install the dependencies, and it started running the npm run coverage where it is running the nyc command. Okay, and one of the output, it's going to give you the Cobratura XML report. Okay, so if I go down, it's going to show you all the test cases which it ran, and at the end, it's also going to give you an error. It's saying that the coverage of the lines is currently at 88.88%, which does not meet the global threshold of 90%. So if you remember, we defined a threshold of 90 lines within the package.json file. Since it did not reach this 90%, it failed the job, right? So again, since the job giving you an error, the job is in failed state, but I want to show you a couple of other things. So one more thing, if you see on the right side, is the coverage. So how am I getting this coverage percentage over here? So this is available because we are making use of the coverage keyword. So it is going to make use of this regex. It's going to pull out this percentage, from the job logs, and it will be displayed in a couple of different places. So one place is within the job. It's going to show you the coverage is over here, 88%. So let me go back to the pipeline. So it also shows me that there is one failed job, which is code coverage. And it's also going to show me the last 10 lines of the job logs, which basically shows me if there are any warnings or, why it, failed, and the error message. And it shows me the test cases. So this is with respect to the unit testing job. So nothing to look over here. So if I go to the jobs tab, of course, I have 3 jobs, unit testing, code coverage, and sample job. And if you see for the code coverage, it's also displaying the percentage in this UI as well. Again, this is provided by the, the coverage option. Okay. So that's about the coverage keyword. But this sample job was not triggered, right? So if you go back to the jobs, this was skipped because the code coverage job is failing, which is required for the sample job. So there might be some scenarios where you want to, continue executing the pipeline even if a job fails. So how do you do that? So we'll check it out in the next session. Let's go ahead and understand how to ignore job failures and continue processing the other jobs within the pipeline. So if you remember, in the previous job, when the code coverage job failed, it skipped the other job which was dependent on it. But in some cases, you might want to ignore a job failure and continue processing the next job. So how to do that? If you go back to the CI/CD YAML syntax reference, so we have a keyword called as allow failure, which determines whether a pipeline should continue running when a job fails. So you can simply use allow failure as true, and even if the job fails, it continues running the next jobs within the pipeline. And else you can use the default value, which is the false option. And when you use the allow failure as true, if the job fails, it's going to show you a warning, but the pipeline will be successfully marked as success. And you can also check out a few examples over here. So within the job, you just need to use the syntax allow failure as true. And you can also have some customizations. So if you want to only allow the failure for specific exit code, you can also do that. So if you scroll down, there is an option where you can control when a job should be allowed to fail using the exit codes as well. So if you say this example, by default, this is going to be allow failure true, but this job will only be allowed to fail if the exit code is 137. As you can see here, in this script, we are by default setting it to 1. So this job will not be allowed to fail. So if it exists, it's going to be, treated as a pipeline failure. So you can also use an array of exit codes, and any one of the exit code should match with the job's exit code. So that is how you can make use of this allow failures keyword to either allow the job to fail and continue processing, or you can also decide based on the exit code as well. So let's go ahead and use this within our pipeline. So within the code coverage job, I'll just use the allow failure as true. So I don't want to use the exit code option for the time being. So if you want, you can, configure that as well. So let me just say add it. Okay. And let me quickly commit this to the feature branch. So let's go to the pipeline. So a new pipeline has been triggered. Okay, so as you can see here, now the job has completed, even the pipeline has been completed, but you see there are a couple of warnings over here. So the sample job has been successfully executed even when the code coverage job failed. So if you hover the mouse on the code coverage job, you see that it's failed with a warning sign. And for the pipeline, it's also successful, but it's going to have this warning sign just to say that, one of the jobs has been failed. Okay, so let's go to this code coverage job. You can still see that the job has failed with exit code 1, but this has been ignored because we have used allow failure as true. And since it was ignored, the next job, which was the sample job, which was dependent on the code coverage job, was also triggered and it also completed successfully. Since the jobs have been completed successfully, the pipeline will be treated as successful, but it's going to have this warning icon displayed here. So if you go to the pipelines tab, so if you see earlier pipelines showed just passed or failed, but our current pipeline is showing us warning, which means that, one of the jobs has passed with some warnings. Okay, so that's about the allow failure. And if I come back to our pipeline, so in the previous session, we added some reports, but we did not explore this. So what are the advantages of adding this code coverage reports? So it has a couple of advantages. So we'll cover the advantages and the benefits in the next session. But in this session, let me quickly show you how to access this XML report. So within the builds, you can go to artifacts on the left side. So in the artifacts, it basically, shows you all the artifacts for different jobs which have been run over the period of time. So for the code coverage job, it has two artifacts. One is the job log, and the other one is the Cooperatora coverage XML file, right? So if you want, you can simply download this. So this will be valid for 3 days. Here you can simply download this, and you can save this on your local machine or in some other location if required. Okay, so that's one benefit of using the reports keyword. So let me go to the feature branch. So that's one advantage. So we'll also check out the other benefits of the code coverage reports in the next session. That's all for now. Thank you.